All right, we're back. We are GAME 2015. That's VR development in the winter 2019 semester at George Brown, and we're week 3, part 1 of our broadcasts, Blender to Unity and UV maps. A couple of administrative things we want to talk about today when it comes to the stuff we're doing. And one of them, the main one, is that remember that your game pitch is going to happen next week during lab and lecture. Next week, I'm going to try and do as many as we can in lab, and whatever we can't get off in lab and lecture. There's not that many groups. I think there's only 4 groups in this section, so we should be able to get them all off within one section. And then when we're done doing your game pitch, if we don't have nothing spills over into the lecture part, we'll actually have a lecture that week about a special topic, whatever it's going to be. Probably next week, if we're going to go on, I'm probably going to give you something around game heuristics when it comes to almost like analyzing a game. I mean, when I say game heuristic, almost like from a game user research perspective is what we're going to go into, to kind of talk about what kind of questions would you ask from a VR perspective, right? When it comes to how a game would work in VR, that kind of stuff, if we go there. But for today, what we're going to do is we're going to create UV maps models in Blender. We're going to map them. We're going to add a UV map. I'm just going to try and make this a little bigger. There we go. And so in the video, you're going to see some of these edges, unfortunately, because my projector here in this room is very bad. But on here, at least you'll see everything you can see. Okay, so help from you guys. I want to delete this model. What is the key sequence to delete a model? What's the key? What's the shortcut key? X deletes the model, right? I want to delete a model. I want to add a new model. What is the key shortcut sequence to do that? I want to add a model. Shift A. Shift A allows me to add a model as an example. And if I wanted to add in a plane, let's start with the plane. I can see that I got a plane here, all right? Again, what I want to do, a couple things. Notice that there is the y-axis this way and the x-axis this way. Typically, what I want to try and do is align my screen a little bit. And all I'm doing here is I'm holding the middle mouse wheel down and dragging to give myself this orbit. I'm allowing myself to orbit across the screen here, and I can see my plane. I want to press S to scale, right? So I want to scale it so that it fills in my entire screen like this, my grid. And one thing is, we know we're going to bring this model into Unity. So on the third icon from the left, or the third tab from the left on the top here, you can see that there are a bunch of unit presets. We want to change the unit preset to meters. That's a very important thing. And also, if I wanted to see exactly how big this is, if I press the N key, I can go out there and I can see that the scale is 8 something, and my dimensions are 16 something by 16 something. I want to make this exactly 16 by 16. Yes. Sorry. In the third icon on the left, third tab from the left, right? 1, 2, 3. On the right-hand side there's this little inspector, and then notice it says units instead of, you just go to meters. Okay. But notice again, you can see that I'm 16 meters now by 16 meters. Can you guys see that? On the left, you can also notice that I'm in meters. On the left, user perspective, and it says meters. That's also an indicator that you're in meters, right? And here, the z-axis is, notice the scale is 8, 8, and the z-axis is 8 point something. Let's make that 8 as well, just to make it so that we're all the same. All I've done basically is scale this flat plane 8 times, right? So it looks like this. And so it's exactly 16 meters by 16 meters. Now, why is this important? It's important because if I was to bring it into Unity, and if I made all my tiles 16 by 16, then I can use some code to inject the tile, to create the tile, or instantiate an object that includes a tile over and over again inside Unity to create a procedurally generated scene if I want to, or randomly generated, whatever you want to say. Okay, so here's my tile space, but really it's just a flat plane right now, and that's what we want. We just want a flat plane like this. Okay, let's talk about some other keystrokes. If I wanted to move this plane around, and I wanted to do it with a keystroke, how do I move or translate an object? What's the keystroke for that? Anybody? The G key. Okay, if I take the G key and I move it around, I can move my plane. I can move it across the Z axis by pressing G and then Z. If I want to move it across the Y axis, I can press G and then Y. And if I move it across the X axis, it's G and then X. Okay. If I don't want any of this stuff to happen, if I start a translation and I want to cancel it, I can just press the escape key, which brings me back to this. Okay. How about scaling? How do I scale an object? What's that? S to scale. How about rotation? What do I do there? R to rotate. Pretty simple, right? We're going to use those again. Here's a new one. I want to hide my lamp and my camera. I can right-click on the lamp in the scene and press H to hide. And right-click on the camera and press H to hide that too. If I want to bring them back, right, it's Alt-H. So I can bring them all back, or I can hide them by pressing H and then H. Or alternatively, on the right-hand side in the inspector, take a look on the top right corner. You can also, you have this little eye next to the object. You can bring it back just like you normally would in something like Photoshop. Okay? All right, cool. So that's how we hide stuff. It's pretty bland, this thing. It's actually pretty gray. Let's right-click onto it. And let's talk about materials a little bit. We talked about it last week briefly, but I want to talk about it again this week. So notice that the fourth tab from the right is this little circle right here. Click onto it, please. And notice that by default, there's no material, right? Because I've deleted my default cube. I don't have a material. When you have an object and you want to add a material, I want you, first of all, what is a material? The material is a program, okay? It's a program that has properties, okay? That's the first thing I want you to think about. And the program, the material program, what it does is it tells Blender and your 3D program like Unity how light in the scene affects the object. Does it bounce off? Is it green? Is it shiny? What kind of properties does the object seem to have when we bounce light off of it, right? So that's what the material does, as well as other things. Think about this as a collection of shaders that are all connected to a container called the material. So material is a container that has different channels, if you will, and each channel would be representative of a shader program. All right, so if I click New, I create a new material. It becomes the default material, and now by default it's called Material 001. Let's just rename it by double-clicking and changing the name. We'll change this to ground. Okay, there's the ground material. Materials have a couple of properties by default in Blender Render. Blender Render Mode is a simple way of rendering objects in Blender. We talked about there's 3 ways to do it, 3 modes. Blender Render is the very simple, basic way, the old way. The newer way is Blender or Cycles Render, which is actually using a shader network. We're not going to do that in this semester. It's a little bit more complex than this. But here we have a diffuse material and a specular material. And if you look at the diffuse is almost like the think about this as the matte property or the base color of the material is the diffuse. It's also called albedo. All right, so if you click onto this, you can see that if I drag this to the green area, it becomes more green. If I drag it more to the brown area, it becomes more brown. The color that we're looking at is the diffuse base color of this material. That's what's happening, okay? Also notice on the right, a name, Lambert. That is the name of a person who created this algorithm. It's a shader, a specific shader, the Lambert shader, for this material to make it look blue, green or brown. Sorry, I'll be okay. That's what it is, so a person's name. And same thing with Specular. Specular, you have Cooktor. One of the most popular ones is Fong, right? It's just a way to show shininess. And if you notice, this is the preview. If I actually pull out the preview here, here's the preview of what the material would look like when it is fully rendered. You see this shiny area. And if I can turn the intensity up of the shininess down here. I can make it so it's shinier, or I can make it so that it's matte. Okay, so shiny, matte. Depending on how much I turn or pull up or pull down the intensity of this thing, I can make it less or more. I can also change the highlight. So if I want to make my specular highlight red, I don't know why I would do so, but let's say if I want to make it red, I could do that. I could change that so it looks like there's a red highlight instead of white, so that there's more or less red specularity here across this thing. Doesn't make any sense. Let's move this back to white. So I'm going to move this little circle, this little selection back to the middle. somewhere like here. And now it's looking like a white, shiny area. Okay, so we want to turn this down for now. Not completely off, something like around 0.13 is what I have. All right, so again, review. Material, it doesn't necessarily wrap the object, but I want you to think of material as a container that contains at least two channels, diffuse and specular, and others in other programs. For now, we have these two. There's different channels. Diffuse and specular have different modes. Think about these as different algorithms to show the diffuse property. Lambert is kind of almost like a standard shader, a diffuse shader, and Phong is almost like a standard specular shader. Specularity means shininess, if you will. All right, and these are the names of people. If I wanted to make this appear more so we can see what it looks like, right now we're looking in the viewport. We see a solid color, right? So there is no shading, there's no shadows, there's no light, right? If I want to see the light on the bottom of the Blender, let's pull it up. You can see that there's a little thing here, a little option. And this is called Viewport Shading. Let's move this into Material. If I do that, you'll see that the light is actually showing up in one part of the material. And if I turn the light back on so you can see it, here's the lamp. And if I click onto it, and if I move it around, you can see that the lamp will affect a different portion of the material that I have around my plane, right? That I've kind of applied to the plane.
What did you click first?
It's this one. It's basically, if you look in the middle portion, there is where it says Object Mode. Next to Object Mode, there's something called Viewport Shading, and you want to choose Material. All right, so yeah, so you've got this ability to move the lamp around, and you can see that it lights up parts of the scene, but not other parts. Okay, so this is very basic. That's what the material does. It responds to light in the scene. Okay, and let's just hide the lamp again by pressing the H key. Hiding it does not remove it. It just hides it from the viewport. Yes?
So those are global properties, right? For example, the object mode, it affects all objects in the scene, not just the plane.
Nope. If my object mode, as an example, is just for the plane, I can only get into edit mode for just the plane, whatever I've highlighted, right? So when I go back into object mode, that means by default all the objects are in object mode, but if I can only put one object in edit mode. I don't know if that makes more sense for you, right?
So,
all right.
Okay, so for the plane, we need to first select the plane and then go to the object.
No, you can, I mean, well, yeah, because I mean, if you deselect the plane, right, you can't, what are you going to go into edit mode for? There's no edit. What are you going to edit? You're going to edit the last thing that was selected, right? It has to edit something, right? So even if it's not selected, it'll edit the only thing that it can. All right, things to do. So let's add in a cube now. So I'm going to Shift A and add in a cube. Notice it adds it in the middle of the plane like this, right? And it's gray. Okay, a gray is a good sign that there's no material that's been applied to it, right? If I want to move the cube up, I can press the G key, the Z key, and the 1 key, and it looks like it's up. So I basically translated, I said move it, the G key, across the Z axis, the Z key, with 1 meter up, and that's what I've done. So now it looks like it sits on top of the plane exactly. Okay. Again, notice on the right-hand side, if I go to the tabs on the right-hand side, the 4th tab from the right, which is the material tab, has no material showing here for this cube. It's taken on the default material, which is just this gray color. All right. Let's add a new material for the cube. So again, the material for the ground is called ground. If I right-click on the cube, I can put a new material for the cube, new material. Let's double-click on this. We'll call it green. Materials are normally called a couple things. They can even be called the color that you're going to apply to them if they're just a base color, or they could be called the thing that you're adding. For example, if I'm adding a wall, I could add a wall material. Or if I have a character and he has body armor, I can call it the body armor material, right? There's different conventions for this. So again, notice that it's green, the material's green, but there's no green because the diffuse is looking like it's gray. You can change this. So if I take the diffuse color and I move it into the green spectrum over here, you can see now that the cube appears to be green. Is the cube green? No, the cube is not green. The material is green. I've created a material that I've applied to the cube. Cube is a mesh. All it is vertices, edges, and faces. And I've taken the material and I've applied it to the cube. It's the material that you're seeing that's applied to the cube, not the cube's color. The cube, it's using the base color of the material that's applied to it. All right? That's the way you should think about it. The material is the container that contains all of the shader information, which is programs, a program that basically tells the viewport how the cube, in this particular case where the material is applied, is going to respond to the light. Is it going to cast shadows? Where is it going to cast shadows? Is it going to be specular or shiny, or is it going to be matte? All those things are here. We only have two properties in this basic form, this Blender render, and we can choose between more or less specularity. If I make this very specular, it's going to appear very shiny. And to show you this, if I move the lamp, let's make the lamp happen. Here's my lamp. If I move my lamp closer to the cube, you can see that, and let's make it down here like this. Notice that the cube is very shiny, but the ground is less shiny, right? Yes.
How do you unhide the lamp?
You can actually press over here on the inspector or press Alt-H to unhide everything.
Alt-H.
Yeah. So if you notice here, you can see that I can see a very shiny surface. And if I wanted to reduce the surface that's shiny on the cube, I can right-click on the cube, and I can reduce the specularity right down so it's less shiny. You can see that I can increase the shine or the metallic, almost like a metallic-like property on the cube, because an object that's more metallic would be a little bit more shiny, right? And again, depending on which algorithm I use, the algorithms are here, Lambert and Cocteau. I can move into a Phong shader, which does things slightly differently. I can move from a Lambert into something like a Toon shader, which gives it a different look and feel. Or I can move into a MinArt, which again is a different way of doing stuff. You want to stick with Lambert for our example today, or for now, or whatever. Okay, so if you notice, this is the basic stuff. So we've got a couple of materials now. If you look at the material, we have two. We have green, and then when it comes to the ground, we have something called ground. Green and ground. We can also change the green one to player if you want. It doesn't matter if this is the player cube. But you can see that there's different materials applied to different objects, okay? And remember how we did the different materials to the same object? The way we did that is, let's suppose I want to make it so that the cube, let me just move the light for a second so you can see part of it. Oops, undo. The light, the lamp. If I move the lamp so you can see one part of the cube, let's move it to the corner somewhere like this so you can see at least a couple faces. Right? Here it is. And if you look at these couple faces, they all look green. If I want to make part of these faces brown, how would I do it? I right-click on the cube. I tab into edit mode. Right? I can select a face. I can go Control-Tab to go into face select mode. Control-Tab. And then if I select one of the faces, this is, let's say, this face. Right now, it looks like there's only green as an option. I can add an additional material slot on the object. So if I click on plus, I can add a material. But instead of making a new material, I can select one that already exists here to ground. Notice it has not been applied. It still looks green right now, right? But if I click assign, then it looks like it's brown. So I can make the ground material here and the green material there, and you can mix and match materials on an object. You have multiple materials on an object. But notice that if I tab out of it, so I'm in object mode again, and if I go to this, there's only one material that exists for the ground, only the ground material. I can have as many or as few slots for materials for each object that I want. Why is that? What if I have an object that has multiple faces and each face is a different material applied, right? I want one face a little shinier, one face a little bit matte. What if I have different components of the object? Maybe one component is a glass component, and I want that glass component to be transparent. I can apply a different material to that component compared to everything else. However, typically what we'd like to try and do is keep each component of a model completely separate, right? As a separate object. We have complete control over it, okay? Okay, questions around materials so far. So materials, if you were going to define them, think about them as a container program that contains other programs, or a container object that contains other programs, and each program, these shaders, affect the way the light bounces off of an object by default. That's what the material does, as well as, and this is the new thing, also contains any bitmap that is going to be applied to the object. Okay, so if I want to apply an image to the object instead of a color, I can do that too. We call these images textures in computer graphics, right? So this, and again, guys, forgive me, I'm going to assume that you know nothing, okay? I don't expect you guys to know anything about computer graphics or textures or anything. That's just the word. We use textures to denote a bitmap or image, and it also is applied to the material. So each material could have its own texture, okay? Why don't we download a couple textures? I actually put a couple of them on Slack for you already. So what textures look like are images. A great site for this is one that I use consistently is textures.com. Here's textures.com. There are other sites you can use as well. This one, if you sign up, you can get X number of credits free. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and downloaded a couple of them for you, and I put them on Slack. One of them is the ground texture, which is a gravel texture, which is a cobble texture. And notice that these textures are slightly different. I've chosen this one, I believe. And if you notice, it's this. I think this is the textures, gravel cobble 0017. I've put it up on Slack for you. And notice what it says here is it's 1024 by 1024, right? That's the texture size. So 1024 and 1024 pixels, that's what size it is, which means this is a 1K texture. It's a 1K texture. There are other higher resolution textures I can go to. Typically, we use 1 to 2K textures for most objects in 3D games. And especially in VR, we don't want to go lower than that because then it'll look more pixelated, right? The best stuff, obviously, is a 4K texture or 8K texture, but that is more computationally expensive to display, right? So again, 1024 by 1024 is not bad. Maybe even 2048 by 2048. Notice also that it is seamless. This is important too. Seamless means that it is tileable. This texture is tileable, and you can tile it. You can put it next to each other. Why? Take a look. There's this part here, and guess what? It connects to probably something along the other side. So it's not going to be completely something that you can't use. It's tileable, a tileable texture that you can repeat over and over again. So I downloaded this one for you, and I also downloaded another one we're going to use. If you go to textures, I've also downloaded this concrete texture for you that we're going to use later on. I went to bunker wall, and I think I went to this bunker, some kind of bunker wall texture, which looks like, I think I chose one of these bunkers. And again, don't worry about it. I think I chose this one. This one. I probably chose this one. So concrete bunker 0212. I downloaded each of them and put them on Slack so we guys can share them today. It's just, we're not going to sell them or anything. We're just using them for non-commercial use. All right, so are you with me? Do you have the textures? Please download them from Slack. And again, if you don't know where that is, or if you haven't signed up for Slack for some reason, it's here. You can see that I have a couple of textures here. There they are. You can just go on Slack and download them, and we can move from there. We can kind of learn from there. Okay? Are you with me? Once we have the textures, I put them on my desktop here. They're just right here on my desktop. I want to be able to apply them to these materials, not to the models, to the materials, right? Each texture can be applied to a material. The materials can be applied to the model, and then the material should show what the texture is. Now, we're going to talk about this in a second. So step one, we've got our material, and let's say the ground. I want to apply a new texture. I'm going to go to the third tab from the right. Take a look. I've got these tabs. I'm on the ground texture. The ground is highlighted. I'm going to go to the texture tab, which is right here. And notice that there is no texture slot assigned right now. Okay, no texture tab. No texture tab. It's in the same material. Ground material, texture tab, 0, nothing, right? If I click new, it's going to open up a brand new slot. It's going to just say texture. Let's just rename this to what it's going to be. It's going to be a gravel cobble. I just want to call it that usually, a gravel cobble texture. That's what it is. And notice it says, what's the type? Type right now we're going to use is image or movie. There's also other types. Some of these, for example, are you can actually have them generated for you as opposed to loaded. We're going to load ours up, which is this image or movie. And if you scroll down, there's an area here that says Open under Image. We're going to click the Open button, and we're going to select our desktop or wherever you put your textures. And I'm going to select my Gravel Cobble JPEG texture and click Open Image. You're going to get a preview right in here like this. Are you with me? If you're not, miss a step. Please do this now. Guys, at the end, you will have a little exercise to do. I've already posted a discussion board, so you need to follow along so you can get your participation marks. I know. You have until midnight. Don't worry. Yes? Yeah. So the third tab from the right. So the fourth tab from the right is this. This is the material tab, right? Material tab right now, I've applied on the ground a new material called ground, right? As an example, I made a bit of a diffuse channel, make it more this brownish color. And then in the same way, while the material ground is highlighted, I've clicked on the texture tab, which is the third tab from the right. I've clicked on a new button to allocate a new slot for the texture. I've renamed it Gravel Cobble by double clicking. And then I clicked this button, which down here under image, there was a button that said open. I opened the image and I loaded up the Gravel Cobble image that I just downloaded from textures.com. All right. Notice though that we don't see it here. And why is that? We have to unwrap it. And usually what happens is we're going to unwrap the model. We're going to create something called a UV map. So back in the day, they were thinking about ways of naming the X and Y coordinates of a image, as an example, compared to the 3D models. So 3D models have X, Y, and Z coordinates. Textures, so we don't confuse them, have U and V coordinates. U being the X-axis and V is the Y-axis. It's just another naming convention for the textures, okay? So when I say UV map, I want you to think about the X and Y plane for an image that I'm going to apply to a material, okay? Remember, I'm not applying it to the model. It's the material container that contains the texture in this case, okay? The material has texture. The material has base color. The material has all the different properties that we need for how light bounces off an object. When we apply the material to the object, that object or another one, I can have as many objects as I want apply the same material, right? That has a texture and lights and all that stuff, okay, the way it's going to shine. So I've got right now this one here, and this material has this texture applied to it. However, it's not showing up here because my object, which is the plane in this case, does not have a UV map or has not unwrapped itself, to create this UV map. You can do so in Blender by going into edit mode for the object. So right now we're in object mode for the plane. If I click into edit mode, tab into edit mode, you can see that the entire object is selected, right? And if I press U, it's going to give me an option to unwrap the object, okay? Now this is not material. This is the object we're back to, okay? UV maps have to do with the object. Textures are part of the material, all right? So the material is an object of its own that can be applied to multiple objects. A UV map is specific to that object. And it's a mapping between an image. Almost it creates a one-to-one relationship between the image, any image that's applied to that particular object, okay? If the object has more than one face, there'll be different islands of UV maps that we're going to talk about, okay? Or UVs. UV islands. Okay, so if you click on unwrap, you can see that immediately I get this. But there's a problem, isn't there? The problem that I see is that the cobblestones are massive, right? If this was 16 meters, by 16 meters, these cobblestones, man, they must be like, whew, rocks. They're huge, right? And cobblestones aren't that big. So how do we make the cobblestones smaller? Well, actually, we don't make them smaller. We make them appear smaller by scaling the UV map. Okay, so right now we're in default mode. And the best way to look at UVs, in my opinion, right, is to go over to change our default layout. On the top left corner, take a look here, guys. There's a little, near the top area, there's this little, you can change layouts from default mode to UV editing mode. And you're going to get something that looks like this. Two screens, a split screen, okay? However, notice that there is nothing on this side that's applied. It looks like this is just, if I scroll out, it's just a 3D view, but nothing again. Why? Because by default, this is in solid mode, and you have to change the viewport shading on the right side to material again. When you do so, you get a preview of what it looks like. I'm going to align everything so that the y-axis is this way and the x-axis is this way again, so we can have a preview. And on the left, you can see that there is this highlighted area. And there's a highlighted area here. We're in edit mode. So you can see this face. This part right here on the left-hand side represents the face that's been unwrapped. Okay? So for every face, if I had an object with 1,000 faces, hero with 1,000 faces. If I had an object with 1,000 faces, I might have 1,000 of these little squares on the left-hand side, right? I only have one face because this UV map or this plane has only got one face, right? The whole plane is one right now. It's one quad. So that's why you only have one over here. If I want to see the cobblestone matrix or the cobblestone texture on this side, I can literally go down to here. There's a little pull-up menu. You can see that I can select cobblestone down here in the middle of my screen. When I do that, it takes up my whole screen. I can scroll out, and you can see that one-to-one, I have a one-to-one mapping. Take a look at this on the right. The one-to-one mapping between the quad that I'm showing here, this island, and this screen on the right. So the view screen on the right, the viewport, and this UV map on the left. UV map, you know, again, X, U, and V, UV map. And this viewport on the right, there's a one-to-one mapping. Take a look at this texture on the left here, on the left side. It's exactly what it shows here, right? So if I want to make this appear to be smaller, I've gone to scale the UV map on the left hand bigger. And the way to do that, we can use all the same keystrokes that we use in Blender to affect the model with a UV map. And the way we do this, for example, if I want to scale this up, I can use the S key to scale this up or down. And if I do that, if I scale it up, you can see that it starts to repeat. Okay? If I scale it down, it goes, or the wrong way. It can invert. It can do a bunch of stuff. So again, what I want to do is maybe kind of move this, scroll out a little bit, and if I press the S key, I can scale the map out so it appears to be bigger. And if I have a bigger map with a smaller texture, what happens? The texture tiles. That's what happens, right? So if I make this, let's say, 3 times bigger, so I pressed S and then 3. Now you have a texture that's 3 times bigger. Sorry, a UV map that's 3 times bigger than the texture, right? So now my texture is going to tile across the other areas on the left. It's going to tile. Because I have a seamless texture, remember we talked about seamless? It's a tileable texture that can keep tiling or repeating all over the place. So it looks like this. It looks like probably around the right size. Would you agree? 3 times. All right. So this is UV Maps 101. I've unwrapped. So process. I need a material. In the material, I need to create a texture slot in the material, which I did, right? And for the material that I have a texture slot, I need to apply the texture by unwrapping the material, the object. When I unwrap the object, I have different kinds of projections. In this case, it's just a flat object. It's a quad. So it's a flat projection, right? And this flat projection is a one-to-one mapping between the quad, which represents my plane, and my texture map, which is just the image I downloaded from the internet. Okay? Are we good? Okay, but what about this, the cube? The cube also has, remember we also applied the same material to the cube. How come the cube doesn't show that material here, right? Because you see cobble material here, because I applied that floor material, my cobble material here. How come?
And it actually changed color.
It did. Brownish. It's not brownish anymore because we've got a material with a texture on it. But how come it's not showing up here? How come my cube is not showing my material?
Well, UV is for the material. It's for the solids.
The UV for the objects, this object here, the cube object, has not been unwrapped. It has not been created. When I press U in edit mode, I actually create a UV map. a unique UV map for each object that I have, right? So for me to do that, I can do it here. Let's do it here. So again, if I'm in edit mode, I'm going to tab out into object mode. I'm going to right click and select the cube. I'm still in UV editing mode, my UV editing layout. And what I want to do is I want to tab into edit mode for the cube. So now I'm edit mode. Now notice I can actually see through it, the cube. And that's because of, in UV editing mode, there's another button down here, which is to the right of face select mode. It's kind of hard to see. It's kind of on the bottom right-hand side where my cursor is. If I check this box, it actually takes away the transparency. If I click it again, you can see that I can toggle transparency kind of on and off by clicking right at the bottom of the screen. I don't want to see transparency, so I'm in here. All right, cool. So if I select the cube, the whole cube, if I press A and select the whole cube, A twice, I can select the whole cube, and press U to unwrap. Take a look what happens on the left-hand side, by the way. If I press U to unwrap and press unwrap, then what happens is I got part of the texture here. Take a look. Here's the texture, right? But the other part has nothing. Why is that? Why is there a piece of texture here, but nothing on this side?
The other faces have different material.
Different material with no texture. There's no texture applied to this green material, right? The green material is just green, right? Around the whole entire cube. But however, this one, when I unwrapped it, had this cobble material. And look, it's a different size. Why? Because the size of my quad here is a one-to-one mapping with my texture on the left-hand side. So if I was to look at this, you can see that I can apply a texture to every face that I want by applying different materials, all right? But this doesn't look right, right? I mean, I really shouldn't have this cobblestone material on the cube. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It should be something else. It should be the concrete material that I want, right? So the way to do that, I'm just going to bounce back into default mode for a second. So I'm going to go back into my default view. And if you look here, I've got my cube, right? And right now, if I look at my cube, I can see that I have the ground material applied to my cube. I can go back to the green material. This is the green material. And I can assign it to that face, and now it's gone. Right? In fact, I can apply the ground material to any part of the cube I want. So I can say, like, okay, I want to click this face. I'm on face select mode. The reason why I see it this way is because I'm in face select mode, right? If I was in vertex select mode, and I really couldn't do that, right? I have to be in face select mode to do what I'm doing, to select faces, right? And if I'm in face select mode, and let's say I say, well, I want the ground to be on shift right click these two faces, then I can just click on the ground and click assign, and then I've got those two faces assigned, right? Pretty straightforward. Or if I don't want those two faces to be assigned that material, I can just click on the green material and click assign, and then they're gone, right? Or I can make a new material and assign that material. So this is the green material, and the green material is just representative of something else. Let's make the green material. Let's rename this material by double-clicking and rename it walls. So my walls material, I want this concrete wall to be applied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my texture. Notice there's no texture slot for the material. There is no texture slot for the walls material. Right? There's two materials here. For the ground material, if I click on the texture slot, there is one. But if for the walls material, I have nothing. I want to click on new, and I'm going to call this thing concrete bunker. And I'm going to go down to where I can open the image. I'm going to go to my desktop where I have the image. You might put it somewhere else. And I'm just going to click on concretebunker.jpg and click open. And now you can see that because I unwrapped everything, the concrete bunker material has been applied to all my faces because I unwrapped everything. Are you with me? So again, I'm in edit mode for me to do this, okay? I only have one material applied to this object right now. The ground object, the ground material is only applied to the plane. The walls material is applied to the cube for the most part. That's all it is. But look at this. Something's weird. I have this weird thing here. I'm not sure if it's the right size for my bunker. And why is that? Well, because all of the UVs for the cube are on top of each other. let's go back into UV mode to show you that. So if I go back into UV editing mode here, and you can see that if I highlight the whole cube, if I deselect all and select all, everything, all the sides of my cube are layered in the same location. What do I mean by that? Let's just select one face. Here's one face. Remember that I can apply any transformations to the UV that I can normally do in Blender for objects. If I press the G key, I can move this face somewhere up here, right? And if I do this one, I can move this face somewhere over here. And maybe if I want to do the, this one, the top one, I can move this one somewhere over here, right? And maybe if I want to choose this one, I can move that one somewhere over there, right? And when I select them all again, you can see that I've moved those faces away. Each face is an island representing a one-to-one relationship between the image and that particular face. Okay? Is that clear? Because that's very important. I just pressed the T key to take away that so I can have more real estate here. But so if you notice, one thing that I also have a problem with seeing in this view is I mean my light source, I'm seeing, unfortunately, this object, I only see the object that's lit from the sides. If I want to see this object unlit, then if I go back into UV editing mode, default mode, and if I click on the object's material, and if I scroll down, there's a place that says shadeless. So for the material itself, for this wall's material, if I go down and click shadeless, it's going to appear to be glowing like this, right? And if I go back to UV editing mode, you can see now that there's a bit of a glow to it, right? But that's only for the faces that have been selected. So if I select the face, right, you can see that I can see all the faces now, and I don't have to worry about the lighting, right? So I can look at all the faces, and I can move them out wherever I want to, even the bottom face, which is it's got some Z fighting over here. I can select the bottom face of the cube. Maybe we'll leave that one there. Yeah.
Question. Why are we seeing the cobblestone texture on the left-hand side?
This? So I loaded it here. I kind of brought it in here.
So,
but
okay, then
if I want to see the concrete texture, I can just do this. It doesn't matter. It's just it's a preview.
Right.
It's not really affecting what I'm actually seeing here.
Right, but you were moving around the faces.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So what it's doing is thank you for that. What it's doing is it's telling me where each of the UVs are mapped relative to the texture. So again, if I go back to concrete, and if I move these around, these should be all concrete, not cobblestone, because it doesn't matter. So if I select all, these are all the ones, and I want to make it so that they apply to the concrete texture. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 faces, right, for the cube. And what I can do, if I deselect all, you can see that there's each face is a separate island. That's what I want you to see. Okay, all I've done is move them around. And I did that by highlighting the face, this one, and then selecting it. You can select or deselect it just like normal. You can also use the B select mode. So if I want to select only one aspect of the face, I can do that, and I can skew it like this. Right? So I can make it so it's skewed. That's kind of weird. You don't want to do this, right? Because it kind of messes up the face. But sometimes what you'll have is this, these islands, as an example for this particular face. So on this side, I've right-clicked to select it in edit mode, the face. On this side, it's a representation of the UV map or the island that's one-to-one relationship mapping with the face on the right.
Right, but the face on the left-hand side is not actually on the texture.
Nope.
But we see it on the right-hand side.
Right, because the texture is tiled. So remember, if it's outside of the texture will keep tiling. You can't see the tiling, but it actually keeps tiling forever. So this texture keeps on tiling and repeating over and over again, everywhere. So example, if I took this map and I moved it to the corner,
okay, now
right, you can see that part of the texture is on the object and part of the texture is repeating off of it. Same thing over here, see? If I move it right on top of it, you can see that it's right on top, or if I move it to the left, you can see that only one aspect of the texture, one part of the texture is going to be repeated. Okay? So if we know this, you can see that there's 6 faces. each face has its own island, right? So imagine again, if I had a really much more complex object, my object would be 1,000 faces, 10,000 faces, 50,000 faces. And if I unwrap that object, it wouldn't be as simple unwrapping like this, right? Because my object fit out 50,000 faces or something crazy might have a different shape to it, a different topography or topology, if you will, right? Especially, let's say, for example, I had a mountain, and the mountain it was a bunch of faces layered all over the place. And what I did was, when I unwrapped it, the mountain had different orientations for the faces, different normals pointing in different directions, and so on. How would this work? Well, remember, there's different ways of unwrapping. All right. So right now, the way we did unwrapping was we just pressed U for unwrap. Let's do another type of unwrapping. So if I select all the faces by pressing A on this side, right? So select all and select all on this side. There we go. So all the faces are selected. If I press U for unwrap, there's different options. One of them is unwrap. The other one is Smart UV project. Let's try that one. Smart UV project. And if I did this one and unwrap it, you can see now that I've got something that looks like this. What it does, it takes the faces and tries to do its magic on its own, tries to do its own calculations. This may not be what you want. But again, even if you had something like this, you can take the UV maps and scale them all together to create the face that you want, right? So kind of the same thing, right? That's one option. The other option you can do is, if I press U to unwrap on this side again, you can choose cube projection. Cube projection will try its best to project the faces as if it was a cube. That's another projection method. Sometimes, though, our projections are very complex. For example, if my cube wasn't a cube, but rather it was a wall with different asymmetrical sides. What do I mean by that? Well, let's change the size of my cube. So imagine my cube doesn't look like this. It looks like a wall. So I'm going to tab out for a second into object mode. I'm going to press S to scale across the x-axis, and let's just make this thing look like this. Here, it's a wall now. All right, there's my wall. Well, now I'm not sure about if the projection is correct. And let me just turn off shadeless for a second so that way you can see it properly. I'm going to go back in my default view. I'm going to go back over here to the material tab. I'm going to turn shadeless off so you can see the wall in all of its glory. There it is. Something doesn't look right on the top, though. It's kind of skewed. And the reason for this is because, actually, it doesn't look bad. But the reason why it's weird is because if I look at this wall and I've taken it to here, you can see that it's not a one-to-one mapping anymore. Take a look. This is a quad that looks like a square, and this is a quad that looks like a rectangle. There is skewing going on, right? What I've done is I've stretched everything and pushed it. So this isn't a one-to-one mapping. And sometimes what you get here, guys, is you get some distortion, right? And you don't want distortion in your images. You want your images to be undistorted when you apply them to the material, right? So the way to do that, of course, is to unwrap them separately. So what you can do is you can say, okay, well, I want to unwrap this one by itself. So you can press U to unwrap and just press unwrap. And what this does is it says, well, it doesn't really do what you want, right? It's not cool. What about if I tried that trick where I wanted to unwrap it as a cube projection? I can select all, right? And then go U, and then a cube projection unwrap. And then again, something's not right because they're squares and this one's is a rectangle, right? So the other ways to do it is you can manually do it by yourself by moving it around. That's a pain in the ass. You don't want to do that manually stuff. You could do it though manually because you can move each individual vertex inside my UV map around. Okay, that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to project it. No. I mean, this is wrong. It's skewed. See, what you're getting is you only have this much space on the object on the top, but actually the image, if you actually had a real image, you can't see it now, but the image is actually compressed because what's happened, or actually stretched. It's stretched because if you look at the top is not a square, it's a rectangle. So you're doing this with the top. You're stretching it to make it a rectangle, to make it take a square projection and put it onto a rectangle. It's not going to happen. You want to unwrap this to have the same shape and proportions as the object you're unwrapping as much as possible. So the way to do that, there's a couple ways. One way is to try and do a smart UV project now. So if I select all, and if I press U and if I go Smart UV Project, sometimes this will work. If I press OK, it'll give you the object in the right orientation. Unfortunately, it did not do this for us. The other way is to project it across different viewports. So if I actually move it so it's I look at an object from one side, like for example, only from the top. So I press the 7 key. I'm looking at it only from the top, right? And I want to project, but only from one perspective, right? Then I deselect all. I only select the top object, the top face, and then press U. And now there's another projection form, which is project from view. If I do this, look what I get now. Project from view, watch. More accurate, right? It's a one-to-one projection now of what I'm seeing, and that's what I want. I want that kind of control, guys.
How did you disable the transparent?
On the bottom over here, there's a little object where it says limit selection to visible clipped with depth buffer, right? That's the one. Do you notice that? So now if you notice on the top, I have this UV map.
Mapping did you select?
So I went to top face only. I want to see the top face only. So I used my numeric keypad to move to the top. You can also do that by looking at view and going to top, okay? Numeric pad, number pad 7, okay? And then I pressed U again, and I chose project from view. Okay, project from view. Now, this is interesting because I can do the same thing for the other ones, the other views. If I go to the front views, this is the front view, and I select that face, right? This is my face. Notice that face is messed up too. It's square, and this face is rectangular, right? If I press the same thing, if I press unwrap, and if I go project from view, now you're going to see a rectangular selection, right? Again, if I go from the right side, you can see that this one is indeed a square. You may want to leave it there, but if you want to be accurate, you can press unwrap, project from view, and you're going to see that. And then if you want to go to the other side, the back, you can press the back is control 1. So 1 is the front, control 1 is the back, right? On the numeric keypad. If I select that face, you can see again that it's not right. You can see the skewing right there. This is a great example. Take a look, Ekin. Look at the skewing of this part right here. See this circle? That's the circle here. That's how skewed it gets. It's stretched this way, right? You want to fix that. And the way to do that is press unwrap, project from view, and you can see now if I was to move this thing, let's move it so you can see what I said. If I move it over here, you can see now it's a circle, not some skewed monster, whatever it was, okay? And again, by the way, notice how I did that? I went, gee, I can move this around anywhere I want to kind of capture any part of the object I want, right? Okay, and then one more face. I got the other face too. I got the this face, right? And this face is okay, but just to do that, again, this would be the front. This is the right. This is the left. Control 3 is the left, right? This is the left side. You can see that left perspective mode. And if I press U for unwrap, project from view, I'm going to get that perspective mode, right? So that's another way to do it. And then also the other problem is the bottom. So the top is 7. The bottom is control 7. That's the bottom. And again, you can do that. You can just select the bottom face. You can see that that's wrong. And then UV, project from view. Not that you're ever going to see the bottom, but what the heck, okay? All right, so now I've projected everything. And if you want them to be connected, notice that they're quite far away from each other. You can move them, right? You can move them around. So, I mean, I move them around. And also, they're different sizes. That's another thing. Notice that this size here is bigger than this size over there, right? You can always move this around. So if I take both these objects, right? And what I can do is I can deselect this object here. I can use B-select to select this object and move it closer. So it's almost touching. I can scroll in so you can see that this object here, and they're not quite touching, but I want to bring this closer. What I can do is I can deselect all, use B-select for the top only, and then move that down, right? Notice that it goes left and right. I can skew it, or I can move across the x-axis, or if I press Y, the y-axis only. So I can constrain it, so then it comes down to here, and then I can approximately connect. Look how that connects better now. It connects one side to the other, so you can have more control over how those two things connect. And if I want to now, I can connect them. by dragging it, moving it across the x-axis. I can do that, and until they're pretty much touching.
So if you can make the unfolded paper cube version on the left-hand side, you get the perfect mapping.
Absolutely. Right, that's where. So all I've done is done the manual way of doing it. I'm showing you the manual way so you see it. Now, again, the top, you can see that the top's messed up. It's like really massive, right? So if I talk about this one and this one, you can see that this top one is big compared to those ones. And the top one should be aligned on the top, not the way it is right now, right? So the way to do that is I deselect all on the left. And then what I can do is I can right-click on one part. And then if I press Control L only selects the object that's connected, the connected object points. So only the top face, this part, right? And then what I can do is I can rotate it so I can move it this way. And again, you can rotate it like, let's say 90 degrees, exact rotation. Then I can press G to move it up. So kind of like over here, let's say. I'm doing it manually so I can show you how it's done. Not that this is the best way to do it, okay? And then I can scale it and then move it with the G button and then scale it and then move it until you get approximately the right size. And then what I can do is I can kind of do one of these where I can select this face and Control L. I made it too close. So if you overlap, you can press Control L, select only that one, and then move it up by G. Usually I want a little bit of separation between them. And then what you can do is you can just select these two faces by Shift right-click, these two vertices, and then press G along the Y-axis, or the X-axis, sorry, to move it this way until it's approximately right. And again, I'm doing this by hand to show you it, but it doesn't have to be this way. There's other ways to do this. And then what I can do is I can use B-select mode, select the entire thing. And then I can use the G key to move it down until on the Y-axis, until I kind of connect with this one. So you can see now that there's more of a continuity that is applied from one axis to the other to kind of create a look and feel. All right, but now, I mean, I'm just showing you this because this is the more complex way of doing it. What I want to do is I want to make it much easier than this. Okay, so going back, let's review again one more time. All right, review. And because now we have to move into actually getting you guys to do something else. All right, review. Material has properties. Material is a separate object, a container that contains a couple of shaders, one for your matte shader or your base color, which is called diffuse. The other one for your specular or shady or shiny stuff, which is called specular and diffuse channels. And then you have a texture that is an actual part of, or is applied to the material, and the texture has a texture slot. We've loaded it in with by grabbing a image from the internet, right? The image is what a texture is. Think of it that way. In order for us to apply the texture to a material, we just load it up. But in order for us to see the texture layered on an object, we have to unwrap the object, create a UV mapping to tell Blender or any program that you're using, whether it's Blender or Maya or 3D Studio Max, how to map the texture onto the surface of the object. Okay, that's what we're doing, or the material to the surface of the object in this case. All right, let's do another thing where we're going to make our tiles like we talked about earlier. I'm going to do it with you. When we make our tiles this time, I'm going to make a real quick and dirty way of doing the tiles, which is what we which I showed you last week. It was as a preview. I'm going to use a plane. I'm going to start a new project here. This is just an example project demo to make you to see what this is about. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to make some kind of maze. You can do it with a flat plane, with a bunch of, if you want to use a bunch of cubes to do it, or you can do it this way that I'm going to show you right now. Okay. So here's how you do it. I'm going to make a brand new project. Follow me here. And notice I have my cube. I'm going to get rid of it, delete it. I'm going to hide my camera. I'm going to hide my light source. So I'm going to press H to hide. I'm going to make sure that I'm inside of my material shading mode so I can see my shader from the beginning, right? I'm also going to make sure that numerically I'm in a meters for units, which you should all be still because we didn't restart Blender, right? It should be meters. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Shift A in my viewport to add a plane. I'm going to scale my plane, right, up, just like we did before. And I'm going to make sure by pressing the N key that it's exactly 16 by 16. Okay, this is important. It's got to be 16 units by 16 units. And make sure that the units are meters, right, for this thing. The other thing I want to do is make sure it's aligned so that the y-axis is up and the x-axis to the left, just to make it easier for yourself. Notice that right now the plane has a default material that looks gray. I'm going to take away the numeric transform by clicking N to get rid of it. You can toggle that on and off. Same thing with toggling this off. You can toggle it off with T. If I want to give myself more real estate, I don't want to right now. But on the right, I'm going to go into my material tab, which is the 4th tab from the right for this object that I've selected, right? So here's my material. I'm going to click a new material. I'm going to call this ground, or actually, yeah, we'll call it the ground for now. So we have a default material. And I'm also going to make the specularity very low. So I'm going to kind of reduce the specularity really low right now, so you can see that. Cool, so I've got, are you with me? I got a plane, I got a material called ground applied to it. I've reduced the specularity down to very low. And what I want to do now is I'm going to go into edit mode. This is the quick way of doing it, guys. I'm going to go into edit mode. So you see the whole plane is selected. And on the left, there is a subdivide button. See the subdivide button? Let's subdivide this plane into little parts. So I got the plane. I've tabbed into edit mode, and I'm clicking the subdivide button. All right, I'm going to subdivide it. On the left, there's some options to subdivide it multiple times. I'm going to subdivide this 8 times. I'm going to deselect all by pressing the A key. Oh. I'm going to press Control Tab and go into face select mode. So you're going to see face select mode, all these little dots everywhere. Control Tab to get there when I'm inside of the edit mode for this object. All right, now I want to right-click and select areas that I want to use as my walls. So imagine these things are walls in my object. So I want to take this wall. Let's make these walls. And I want to walk in this area here. So I want to kind of create areas where I can't walk. This is my wall. Almost like I want you to think about this as part of the maze. So this is the area, the stuff that I'm selecting are the areas that I cannot walk. Those are the walls. Let's suppose that I make something like this. And so notice I'm making the walking area about 2 tiles wide. Don't want to give my character a chance to walk through the maze. Let's make it so that I also block off this area, right? So I can shift right click is what I'm doing, right, to get there. And you can see that I've got a walkable area here. And you know what? Let's make it so that I cut off this area and it looks like this, something like that. So you have a bit of a space there, a little bit of wasted space. If you really want not to waste it, you can make that whole thing kind of filled in. It's up to you. You make your own design. All right, cool. So I've selected the faces that I want to make into walls. Now, this is the new key. I want you to press the E key for extrude. And then I want you to move up. Notice that it's moving up a certain amount of space. Let's move up by, let's say, 0.5. That's 0.5 meters or 50 centimeters. If I move up to, sorry? Yes. And if I type 2, that is 2 meters, right? If I type 4, that's 4 meters. And press Enter just to select that. So 4 is what I want. That seems about right. Yep. If I press N, you can look at up here. You can see that these walls, as an example, the height of these walls, how tall they are. It's not really quite accurate, but you can see that it's going to be about 4 meters. E is going to expand. Now, if you want to show you that again, I'm going to Control Z. Control Z doesn't just stop, but it also keeps the highlighted area. So if I press Control Z again, you can see that it kind of takes me down to this point, right? So if I press E to extrude, right, then I can move this wall, move up by number of meters. I can press 2. I'll go up only 2 meters. If I press 4, 24, that's 24. If I press just 4, then it'll just accept that. And you can see that on the bottom left corner of the screen. Bottom left corner of the screen, guys, see this? It tells you how many meters I'm moving up. All right? So if I press Enter, bottom left corner was right here. If I press Enter, I've accepted, and I've got these things. Notice that I've actually extruded up. And what I want to do here is I want to apply a different material on the walls than I have on the ground, okay? So a couple ways I could do this. I could just, I can create another material. Let's make another material here. We're going to call it walls. So I'm going to make another material slot, make a new material, call it walls, right, as an example. And the walls material, here's the walls material, right? It's also going to have, I'm going to make it 0 specular, so no specularity, right? It looks the same for now, right? But there's 2 names, walls and ground. Right now, the ground material is everywhere, okay? What I want to do is I want to take this into the front view, like this. I want to take this into orthographic mode, like this, by pressing the 5 key on the numeric keypad.
Front view was
1. 1 for, and then 1 and then 5. 1 and then 5. And then if you can't do that with your numeric keypad, if you don't have one, you can go to View, right? And then you can go to the front view, which is the 1 key, right? Which is this. And then orthographic mode on the numeric keypad here, right? So you can do that through the menu as well as through the numeric keypad. It's up to you. Numeric keypad is just a little easier. All right, cool. So I've got this in orthographic front view, right? And I'm going to deselect all. I'm going to go into wireframe mode by pressing the Z key. Notice I can see through everything now, right? So again, the 1 key takes me back into that view. Okay, I want to press the B key for box select, and I want to select only the top faces, but not the bottom. Don't select the bottom faces, just the top, like this. Leave the bottom deselected. And now you get something that looks like this. So I selected everything except for the bottom faces. So remember, the bottom ones are the ground, and now I'm going to assign the walls material to the other ones, and click on Assign. So I've got 2 textures now. One of them is applied to this, the walls, and this one, the other place is the ground texture. Are you with me? Yes? Take a look at this. Once I've assigned this, and again, to assign this, what I did was, guys, I went to the 1 key. I pressed the 5 key to get into orthographic mode. And what I did was I pressed the Z key to go into wireframe mode, right? And once I've done that, what you're going to see is when I go into thing, I've selected it with B select, so box select mode, like this. And then I've just assigned the texture to the walls. Don't worry, you can't see the walls. Walls and the ground look the same right now. Don't worry about that, okay? Now, here's the cool thing. Once I have this selected and I've applied the walls material, I can deselect. Or I can select. I can also select the ground material, which you see is also the bottom. So it'll select all objects that have the ground material applied by clicking select or deselect. All objects that have the wall materials applied by clicking select, or deselect. Yes?
When you select the ground, it selects everything including.
Because you didn't assign the walls. So you have to assign the material to the wall. So you have to highlight only the walls and then click assign.
Yeah.
And then it won't be the ground anymore. It'll just be the walls. All right. So if you're with me, if you're not, I'm going to go around after this. Okay. And I'll stop recording in a second. If I go around and if you see there's 2 materials. I've got the walls material. So if I click on the walls, if I select them, those are the walls. If I click on the ground, I select those. Everything is selected. I can deselect the ground, or I can deselect the walls. No problem, right? Okay. Now, let's go back into solid mode by pressing the Z key or Z key, right? So we can see everything. And I want to load my textures. So I want to click the ground texture first, the ground material. and I want to click the texture button, which is this, the one next to the material button, or the material tab. Inside here, I want to make a new slot for the ground texture, new. And I'm going to call this gravel cobble, like we talked about before, gravel cobble. And I want to load or open, I want to open up, right? On the desktop, I have the gravel cobble image, right? So that's where it is. Now notice you're not seeing it here because we're in solid mode. Let's move into material mode for a second. And you can see that now that the ground has this really weird color, right? But I don't see the material applied because, why? We have not unwrapped that part. So to do it quickly, I'm going to go back to the material. I'm going to click select, and I'm going to click U for unwrap and unwrap. Now, when I do this, if I go back into UV editing mode, you're going to see that it's a little bit skewed like this. So if I click on the gravel cobble, and if I click on the right, if I go into material, and I zoom out, you can see that something's not right. It's kind of skewed like this. I've kind of made it, I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just cobblestones. But if I want to align this, remember, I can do a unwrap from the view. So I can do like top view. I can do orthographic. There's my top orthographic view. And I can press U, 7. And I can do U for unwrap. And I can project from view. Now take a look at the left before I do this. Boom, right? So now it's a one-to-one kind of mapping, but it's a little small. Let's make it bigger. So I'm going to project from view. Yeah. And then I'm going to scale it up, this whole part here. I'm going to press S to scale on this side. And I'm going to move this up until I see that they're right. Maybe a little bit more. Maybe something like this. Okay? That's what you should see right now. I've just taken away the tabs by taking the T key away, and I've taken the N key away here. So I've just like made it so that you see this. Take a look. So you've got your only the cobblestones here, but not anywhere else. Are you with me? All right, cool. Let's go back into default mode. Default mode only shows the cobblestones in one place. I want to take care of the walls now. So again, I'm going to click the walls material. I'm going to, first of all, on the ground, I'm going to deselect all, deselect the ground. On the walls, I'm going to select the walls like this. I'm going to go into my texture slot, my texture tab on the right. Notice there's no texture anymore because this material doesn't have a texture slot assigned. I'm going to click new. I'm going to take this texture slot and call it concrete bunker, right? Concrete bunker. That's what the material is going to be called anyway, the texture. And then I'm going to click over here, open, and I'm going to open up the concrete bunker texture that I downloaded and press open. Now, again, you don't see that anything's been applied, but we need to unwrap it. Now, here's where it gets hairy, right? Because, hey, this isn't proportional, right? It's kind of got weird bumps to it, like all over the place. How do I unwrap this one? Well, there's a couple ways to do this. There's the easy way, and there's the hard way. Let's do it the hard way first, and then we'll do the easy way afterwards. The hard way. The hard way would be if you wanted to only give certain parts of this, you can unwrap from each projected view for each face. So for example, I wanted this face, this face, this face, this face, this face, and these ones, I can select only the ones I can see from the front view. That's the front view, right? So those are only the ones I can see from the front view. And then I can press unwrap, and I can go project from view. And when I did that, you can see that you're going to get your concrete only on those faces, right? And I could do that for the other sides. I can go to the right side, and I can do the same thing. I can just select all the faces that only the right side would see. So only these ones. This is crazy, right? But I could, if I really wanted to do it this way, and do this, and then go to the right side and press the U key, and then project from view, and then I can have kind of a texture projected there. It's kind of too big, but I can scale it later, and I can do the other ones. Let's just do them all. So the 7 key for the top, So I can kind of select everything from the top. Only the top, so I can use maybe the C select mode. Circle select, only select the top faces, like this. Right? And here, I'm just using the circle select to do that, and press escape to get out of selection mode. I can do that, and then from the top view, I can unwrap, and I can project from view. Yay. There's that. And you know what? Let me see what else I missed. I got the one, the right, and let's go to the back. So Control 1 takes me to the back side. So then I can select these ones. All the faces I can see from the back side. Again, this is the very slow way and dumb way to do it, but I'm showing you just in case you want to do it this way. It's not terribly bad, but it's just really slow. And then you can see that this is good. And Control 3 would be the left side view. And then I can do it from this side as well, so I can kind of do all those. I'm only selecting the faces that I want to unwrap from different parts. I'm unwrapping different faces separately, as opposed to unwrapping them together, right? So, okay, and unwrap that one. So again, I'm just going from each particular view and unwrapping everything. So I think I've got everything. So I did the front face, I did the right face, I did the left face, I did the back face, but I didn't do the bottom face. Do I have to do the bottom face? No. No one's going to see the bottom. So I don't have to really do the bottoms because the bottom is kind of never going to be seen, right? So I've only got the faces projected, and it looks pretty cool. It's not bad. If I go to UV editing mode, you can see that if I select all, then I've got this weird map going on, right? Where I've got my cobblestones like this, but and let me just I'll go to here. I want to look at only the concrete bunker, and I want to select the ones just for the concrete bunker. See if that works. No, it does not. So then I only want to see the faces that are going to be influenced by the concrete bunker. And the way to do that would be going back out to default and going back to the material for the walls and clicking select, and then going back into UV editing mode where you see the concrete bunker materials. There they are. Take a look. So you can see that they're pretty small. And if the concrete bunker, it looks like the circle is huge. This divot that's out of the concrete is really big. And I think it's a good indicator that I have to scale up. So I'm going to take this and scale it. Notice that the maps are on top of each other. You can change that by moving them around. But let's make it so that the concrete bunker is something that looks like this, maybe really big. And then what this does is if you look at this object now, you can see that it's proportionally better, right, than before. Okay. All right, so that's the really long way to do it. Okay, here's the fast way to do it. We know that these are all cube-like objects. What if I did a cube projection instead? So if I did this again, if I press U for unwrap, and instead of projecting from view, I said cube projection. What does that do? It does this, actually. It kind of works too. And that's not another bad way to do it, the cube projection way. It's quick, it's dirty, and it's about the same quality. So if I did this, you can see that I can go into a much larger view. Then you can see that that's not bad either. And that's the quick way of doing it, just using a cube selection, because these are cubes, kind of. Right? And you can see that that's not bad. Okay? So that's the two ways I would recommend quickly doing them. You can also manually move these things around. If you didn't like it, you can make obviously a bigger texture would be better because then you have more selections. All right, so that's great. So I've got my stuff selected. I'm going to go back into default mode, and I'm going to go into tab out of edit mode into object mode, and this is what you might see. Cool. I want to bring this thing into Unity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as tile 4. I actually put on a couple of tiles today inside Slack, tile 2 and tile 3, right? I'm going to put tile 4 onto Slack as well. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to call this tile 4. just so you have it. Save as Blender file. There you go.
So it's tile 4.
Tile 4.blend. Yeah, and I'm gonna give it to you guys in a second. So if you didn't do what I did, or if you did something similar but not quite, I'm just gonna drag tile 4.blend into Slack, so you have my version. So you can compare my version with yours. Okay. Or worst case, let's say you just couldn't follow along or whatever, and you want to see this later. You want to compare what I did and look at the materials and the properties. You can do that. It's for comparison only. All right. Your job, if you look at the discussion board that I created online, your job, if you look at the discussion board, I got this discussion board. It's called Blender to Unity Exercise 2, is to bring in your model from Blender into Unity. And the way to do that, and then take a couple snapshots of it. All right. So the way to do that is you make a new Unity project, which you guys should all know how to do. I'm just saying, maybe you should all know how to do it. I don't know. That was a bit of a laugh. Is that you all know, or you? Of course we know. I don't know. Hopefully it's the latter. Of course we know, Tom. What are you talking about? Of course we know how to do it. All right. So I'm calling it GAME2015 W2019, and it's lesson 3B. You guys are the B team. Just because you're the second section. And I'm making a new project, create projects. By the way, at the end, I'm going to put this project up on Blender, up on Slack too. So you'll have both projects from the morning, and from the earlier part of the morning, and then from your class. All right. And now this is the thing. In Unity, what you want to do is, I think organization is super important in Unity. One of the biggest problems we have as developers in Unity is we're completely unorganized. We make in the assets, we have like tons of stuff all over the place. Guys, you're going to see as we move into VR, the VR portion of our class, that I'm not going to allow that. I want you guys to be organized. You're going to get marked on organization when you hand stuff in. All right. Right now, I'm showing you the organization I want. Later on, you'll be marked on it. Notice we're in a sample scene. We have a scenes folder. We're going to rename this scene main, just to keep it nice. I always, in my assets, typically I want to rename my folder for scenes so that it has an underscore, so it appears at the top. I also add in a couple folders. One of them is I want to add in a materials folder. I also want to add in a models folder where we're going to put our model in. Models, I'll be okay. Not modes, models. I want to put also in there a textures folder. Here's my textures folder. So models, materials, and textures. One thing I want to do in Blender, going back to Blender for a second, I'm going to resave this file. Actually, it doesn't really matter. But one thing to do is that, to note, is that the texture for Blender is not packed by default. So that means that even though I've applied the texture here, for example, this is the walls texture, you can see that scrolling down, there's this little area under source where there's this little empty bucket, it looks like. If you click there, it actually makes a little envelope appear in the bucket, and that means it's packed. That texture is packed with the blend file. And if I go back to the ground, I can do the same thing. I can go back in here, and I forgot to do that. I can just pack the ground with the blend file, and then I can save the blend file and to use for later on. Now, here's the thing that I want to do. I want to, sorry? Sure. So when I pack it, when I mean pack it is so it's part of the blend file. The material itself doesn't do it. It's if the ground material has a gravel cobble texture assigned to it, if I scroll down, there's an area called source. There's a little symbol in here. It has to look like a little envelope. If it looks like a little bucket that's empty, you got to click onto it. If you click on this little button right here, right, you can pack everything in there. Okay, and you can do that for both materials. All right, so now that I've done that, I have my tile 4. Here's my tile 4 right here, and I want to drag and drop it into my Unity scene. So if I go back to Unity, here's my Unity scene. And if I pull my Unity scene aside for a second, and I go into my models folder, here's my models folder, I want to drag and drop my tile 4, here's my tile 4, into Unity, my assets. area, right? So I just dragged and dropped my tile 4 into here. Unity will convert it. It accepts blend files, no problem, which is a great thing. It never, in the beginning, by the way, it did not. Now it does, which is good. Let me just make sure that you guys can see my Unity screen. So again, it's different here in class compared to what you see online. That's for sure when you're watching this thing. All right, so notice that I have my tile 4 here. You see it? Okay, on the right, when I click onto it inside of the assets area, right? Take a look at what I got here. I have my model. Guys, you need to watch or else you're not going to get this. I have my model. Under the model, I have options. One of them that I want to click on is generate colliders. Please generate this on. Click generate colliders. So then immediately what it's going to do is generate like convex colliders, so you don't have to do that by your hand. You never want to do that by hand when you bring a model in from Blender. I'm telling you right now. It's way easier this way. Okay. Next, if you notice down here, it says that there's normals, there's quads, there's vertices, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that you see here. Leave this alone. Click apply. That's the first part. The first part is I just made it so that all my models have colliders. Next, if I go to materials, right? The materials tab. There's the model tab and there's materials tab. Later on, we're going to explore the other two. I'm going to extract materials. Please do this. Extract materials. When you do that, it's going to ask you, where do you want them? I want them to go into the materials folder, which I created earlier. And if I look at the materials folder now, I have 3 materials it creates for me for whatever reason. I have a walls material, I have a gravel cobble material, and I have a ground concrete bunker material. I'm not going to need the ground concrete bunker material. Let's get rid of it. So just get rid of that. I just need walls and ground. That's all I need, these 2, walls and ground, okay? And I want to drag my model, here's my model, into the scene. When I do that, it's going to show my model like this with no textures. I don't have the textures. Even though I pack them, it doesn't matter. Unity doesn't, that's one thing that Unity doesn't do with Blender. It doesn't bring in the textures from Blender. You can drag and drop them into Unity by them yourself. So if I know that I'm going to have my concrete or gravel cobble and concrete textures, I can grab these 2 textures and copy and drag and drop. And there you have them, concrete bunker and gravel cobble, those 2 textures we just made. And then if you notice, right, I want to, in my tile 4, right, if I take now my, and if I rotate the scene, again, you can rotate the scene different ways. If I kind of rotate, right click and use my eye and then middle mouse wheel and kind of drag across, right? You can see that there's different parts. If I take my materials, so here's my materials. I have my ground material and I want to drag in my texture in here, right? So I go to textures and I take my ground material has gravel cobble and I drag and drop it into the albedo section of my material. You can see that automatically I got my cobblestone in there immediately. And if I do the same thing with my other material, which is my walls material, and if I drag and drop my texture, which is concrete bunker, into the albedo section, it's going to have that exact walls. And my friends, there's your scene. If you want to fly through the model, you can always use right click and then W to fly through, like you're using a first-person controller. All right, so I can fly through by, oh, hey, what happened there? That's weird. Look at that. It's like that was the one piece we missed somehow. Maybe we didn't click on that, right? Yes. Remember that you have different materials. The materials aren't being applied to the object. The texture not being applied to the object. The texture is being applied to the material, right? So you have to go to the material, right? And remember what I did was when I brought the Blender model into Unity, right? What I did was I extracted the materials, right? And I did that through here in the model, under tile 4, under the materials, there's a button that used to be here called extract materials. And then now I have 2 materials, and I can apply each texture to each material, just like in Blender, right? Now there's a problem. I didn't see this, maybe because of the lighting. In Blender, I missed this. So what could I do to fix this? I'll be honest with you guys, not much. I'd have to take this black into Blender. However, what we can try, if I look at the materials, is I know this is the ground material. I could probably apply it like this, and hopefully it'll work. And by chance, it kind of did. All right? But that's typically not what happens. I just missed it. Instead of selecting it in Blender, I missed it. And so it came in as, if you see that purple color, that is a good indicator that there's no material or texture applied to that area, right? Okay, so not bad, right? So from a tile perspective. So what I want you to do is for discussion board, by the end of the day today, some point, midnight, let's say, you have time to do it. Don't do it right now. If you have no time, is what I want you to do is, let's just rotate and do this. I want you to take different screenshots. So maybe one from here, let's say. So show me that you've got the thing. So you have some texture applied, maybe from different angles, right? Kind of thing. You can also take one from different sides. And again, you can do, if you right click and you use the W key, you can fly through as if you're doing a first person perspective. If you press the A key or the D key while you're pressing the right mouse button, you can go right and left. If you press the E key or the Q key, you can go up and down, okay? And that'll fly through. So it's kind of a really good control in terms of how you want to fly around the object, as opposed to scrolling and moving and all that stuff. This is a way better way of doing it. And you can zoom in on exactly where you want on the object to take a snapshot. Okay? Questions around exercise 2 for today? This is for your participation marks due by midnight. Take your time. Yeah, here in Unity, not in Blender. All right? Blender is nice, but use your model. Please don't take a snapshot of my models. This is your model. Make your own.
What if your model is the same as my model?
It won't be the same. It can't be the exact same, right? It'll look slightly different. So make it so it's different.
Yeah, but I followed the exact same
can show
thing
you right
did.
now for
Yeah,
mine
for
looks
big.
exactly
It looks exactly like yours. I did that by
All right,
myself.
great, fantastic then. So let's hand in the one you made. Hand in the model you made. All right.
Okay.
I'll be able to tell anyway if it's not mine, right? So
I didn't go on Slack and download this.
it's okay. I gave it to you on Slack just in case.
Yeah.
Right. So guys, even worst case scenario, if you can't do it by yourself and you still want to participate, it's okay to use one of the tiles I made. Okay. The idea here is not to use my models, but actually to explore things in Blender, so you can create your own worlds. Right. That's the idea. Right. Again, is this a modeling course? No. But I think it's a great opportunity for you guys to learn a little bit about modeling, so you understand how to bring objects into Blender, or sorry, into Unity from other sources, like Blender, like the asset store, like other places, and maybe even manipulate them. You bring it into from the asset store into Blender, and then because you can actually open up a lot of the asset store objects, models. Usually they're in FBX format, and then when you do that, you can actually get your objects here. And manipulate them to the way you want. Okay, now this is a very simple example of how we can use UV mapping on a very regular looking object, okay? A hard surface, if you will. Okay, and that's it for me this week. For the labs on Thursday, when we get together, we're gonna have a little tutorial more on, excuse me, VR UX. We're gonna go back into the user experience part. And again, just from an administration perspective, please remember that next week, you're going to be doing your game pitch presentations to me, okay, in lab time. That's it for me. I'm going to save this thing as well. No liking and subscribing. You don't need to do that. It's just for you guys, okay? I make these videos for you guys, for students, not for subscribing. If you want to subscribe, you can, but that's not really the point. I will save this up, and I'll put this I'll save the Unity model in or the project in Slack so you can have it. Okay, thanks so much.